Pleasure to be back. I was here about 10 years ago when you had Dean Ornish here as a speaker. You remember that. But before I start, does anyone remember the Cancer Plan 2000? You all look too young. Well, I was invited to write a paragraph. Well, it was a chapter actually on where the NHS is going for the Cancer Plan. And I said in that chapter, what we need is to integrate exercise and holistic medicine in oncology units throughout the UK. Now, 19 years later, the only people who have actually achieved that is Genesis Care. So congratulations, and I hope you're the flagship for the rest of the NHS. Well done. So I'm going to move on now. Yes, I'll start off. It's not about money, but there it is. What is the impact of cancer? Well, as a person, you know what the impact of cancer is. But for a country, we spend £2 billion a year on drugs. We spend about £5 billion a year on all the x-rays and surgery and things. But what is often forgotten is £8 billion on the consequences of people having cancer, the side effects they're experiencing, the increase in late diseases such as diabetes, heart attacks, strokes, and the effect on the economy if we don't get people back to work and looking after their families. And so that's actually twice the cost of what people talk about all the time. In fact, the drugs is a small part of it. So this is something we are trying to address in our research unit, is to say, of course, we do mainstream trials as well. We're doing some on these wonderful CDK inhibitors and Herceptin, etc. But we're very interested in trying to develop strategies and quite pragmatic things, things you can sort of do to improve your outcome and improve the well-being. So we do evidence reviews, looking at the world literature. We ask patients how they feel, what can change their behaviour, and if there's gaps in knowledge, conduct either cohort studies or randomised studies. And with that data, we're publishing in mainstream journals, which are read a little bit. We then publish in lay-type journals like Cycling Weekly, and quite importantly, we advise Macmillan and many other people on what's in their information booklets, which of course should be evidence-based. And recently we managed to get sugar taken out of their chemotherapy booklet, as one of our latest achievements. And of course, on a personal level, all this data forms the basis of the new book, which is to keep healthy after cancer. It's important to get this information out. There's no point doing this research and sitting in a cupboard and talking to your friends about it. So we have a newsletter which goes out 4 times a year and a blog, which we find very useful because we often get a number of questions from patients such as, should I be taking cannabis? Should I be going on a treadmill during chemotherapy? Should I be fasting before chemotherapy? So what we'll do as a little group between us and Bedford and Cambridge, we'll do a little evidence review. We'll put it on the blog so we can say, well, this is our current view on whether you should fast or not, for example. And that's quite useful. And that's what the website looks like. You can just click on a button and find the evidence. And these are the 6 research priorities: obesity, gut health, chronic inflammation, sugar, exercise, and polyphenol-rich foods, fruit and veg, etc., with the aim to improving outcome and improving well-being. And I'm not going to talk too much about exercise because Hayley very eloquently already covered that, except to say we've done 3 evidence reviews on the biochemistry of exercise. What happens to your body when you choose to exercise? And also, you've already heard of the very good evidence out there. If you go into an exercise program, there is strong evidence you will improve your quality of life and reduce fatigue, even if it's the last thing you feel like doing when you're fatigued already. You've already touched on this, Hayley, but it's not just a psychological benefit of exercising. You do get physical changes happening to your body. It improves the expression of the genes you've been born with. It actually acts as an antioxidant. We always talk about antioxidants in food, but exercise is an antioxidant because it enhances the antioxidant enzymes. It improves gut health. And of course, if you're outside, it'll get your vitamin D levels up and help control weight, etc. But it's not as easy. Most oncologists will not advise people to exercise at all. The other sort of 3/4 will say, yeah, you need to go for a jog or something. But, you know, that's not going to change people's behaviour when they're feeling sick and tired. And, you know, in our unit, we give everyone a sort of an hour's consultation about how they can exercise. Is walking football better for you? Should you be going to the gym? And we refer to local gyms on the 12-week referral programme, and make sure the gym instructors have had the level 4 qualification, so they are sensitive to people's needs. So they might have hand-foot syndromes, they can't walk very well, they might be incontinent, they might be concerned about osteoporosis, so therefore they should be doing weightlifting exercise. So you do the exercise which is right for that individual. Of course, you know, if we were all more wealthy, we could all afford to go to Genesis Care and get a personalised physiotherapy doing that all for you, but you've got to start somewhere, so that's not a criticism. Right. When do you start? Well, this was a study we did at Cambridge, which looked at people who exercised during radiotherapy, and this was 444 men, so quite a big study, and it showed those who exercised during their radiotherapy had less side effects than those who didn't, and that in terms of prostate, that was better erectile function, less incontinence, less rectal toxicity. So it's great that you've got the exercise unit in the radiotherapy unit. I'm not sure if people exercise every time they come for a fraction of radiotherapy, but that would be a good thing to do, I would imagine. Chemotherapy, you know, everyone's familiar with the PACES study, which is a great study randomizing people during chemo to moderate, no, or intense exercise. And it was the intense exercise group had better immunity, less admission with neutropenic sepsis. They recovered quicker, better cardiac function. So there's no sort of limit. You don't take it easy. It's got to be right from the start. Being overweight is a common side effect now after chemotherapy and hormone therapies, and it's quite distressing for many women. It also leads to worse surgical outcomes, worse chemotherapy outcomes, worse radiotherapy outcomes, and it's linked to a lot of chronic diseases like diabetes, etc. So we've really got to try to stamp this out. Many patients say, well, it's easy for you. What are the 3 things I can do which are effective and evidence-based? And it is quite straightforward, and these are the things which have been published with the best. 13 hours of fasting overnight. This is a paper published in JAMA, one of the world's best journals. If you have your evening meal a bit earlier, breakfast a bit later, and that in a study was shown to reduce the risk of breast cancer relapse, lower inflammatory markers, and lower weight. It's quite a simple thing. You don't have to starve yourself 3 times a week and, you know, make your life a misery. It's an easily achievable thing. Taking exercise before breakfast extends the fasting period, and of course, if you've got an empty stomach, your body uses the energy reserves in the fat rather than what you've just eaten. And reducing processed sugar. There's a number of studies, hundreds of studies, which show that processed sugar is one of the biggest driving forces for obesity and other things. Why? Well, sugar's got a lot of calories in it. It's less satiating, so you have a sugary drink. You don't actually fill up very much. So an hour or 2 later, you've had this great peak in the blood sugar, and you become slightly hypo and hungry again, and you eat again. But if you have slow release foods like fat or complex carbs, the sugar doesn't have that peak and trough, so you don't feel hungry till much later in the morning. We also know that sugar, as you just heard, will drive insulin, increase the risk of diabetes, it damages gut health, increases chronic inflammation, and it raises insulin-like growth factor, which all drive cancer cells in the wrong direction. So what do we do as a health professional, knowing that sugar is so harmful? We give patients sugar. This was a goodie bag, which was given for 6 months before I noticed, and that was inside it. So that was a gift to patients. I took it away, and the woman got really angry with me. And I did it nicely. I wasn't being rude. I said I'd prefer not, but she got really angry. And this is what the nurses do when you walk in. You see that in front of the nursing station. Has anyone experienced that? Yeah, I thought so. So, you know, anyway, what you do in your own time is up to you. But in the workplace, I think we should set an example. So this is a study we've just done. well, when I say study, service evaluation, the best thing, scientific. So we managed to get 44 volunteers with one of our units called the Primrose Unit, and we said we will replace all sugary items with fruit and nuts in public spaces, making sure they've got not a nut allergy, of course. And so they walk in and you see that instead of what you previously saw. But we did it formally, and we measured a happiness score, a validated happiness score and weight. It was a 4-month intervention, and we did the scores again afterwards. This is the results. Mean reduction, there was 72% of the staff lost weight, and as you do know, there's quite a lot of the staff are not that thin. They were quite pleased with that. It's not a great bit, but most of them lost weight. They got happier, particularly those who lost more weight. So that's a validated score. And this is when we asked the patient at the same time, at the end of the evaluation, we asked 100 patients, what you thought of that. Now, this was really encouraging. 94% said it was a good idea and it would definitely help them make the lifestyle changes which are needed. And that's a pilot, and I hope that we're going to publish it in a health journal and hope it may sort of expand to a wider thing. Because you don't smoke in the units anymore, did you? I'm old enough to remember doctors smoking on ward rounds, and that seems alien. Anyway, it's not just about sugar, of course. The interaction with sugar and other things are important. Sugar decreases gut health because it feeds the unhealthy bacteria, whereas the healthy bacteria feed on breakdown products from polyphenols. We know that if you have polyphenol-rich fruit, veg, it will reduce the glycemic, it slow down the rate of sugar transport across the wall, so it reduces the negative impact of sugar. That's why fruit is always healthy, even though it's got a tiny bit of sugar in. We know that polyphenols will feed the healthy gut. We also know a healthy gut will increase your absorption of polyphenols. So it's a whole sort of cycle what we need to be looking into. And it's important because we know if you have poor gut health, you're more likely to get bloating, dissatisfied GI tract, and increased risk of cancer, indigestion, etc. But we're all familiar with this sort of gut-brain process. It increases your risk of fatigue, colds. That's why athletes need to look after their gut health, and all these chronic diseases. Most of them are linked to poor gut health, like high cholesterol, heart attacks, dementia, etc. But in oncology, as you may know, we've heard from the first speaker of these wonderful immunotherapies which are being developed, and they effectively need the immune system to work. So what the immune therapies are doing is uncloaking the cancer cells so the immune system can recognize it as foreign and kill it. So if your immune system is impaired through a poor gut health, you are not going to respond as well. In fact, those trials have been done. There's about a 40% reduction in response rate if you are not got a healthy immune system or a healthy gut. So having a healthy gut will help your cancer, these marvelous cancer cells work better, and they'll be better tolerated, and that's also important. How do we improve gut? Well, I'm speaking to the experts here, but of course you need to eat a lot of bacteria-rich foods, like live yogurt, miso soup, sauerkraut, etc. But actually it's the prebiotics are probably more important. And the two main categories of prebiotics would be the polyphenols, and B, fermented soluble fibers such as inulin in leeks, garlic, chicory, asparagus, etc. And in things like tea, pomegranate, bananas. And they actually allow more room for the healthy bacteria to grow, and they act as antibiotics to kill the bad bacteria. Whether you should take a supplement, there's no evidence that taking a probiotic supplement will help a healthy gut. So if your gut is healthy already, you're probably not getting much extra benefit. But there is evidence, this is where the trials are, if you've had a course of antibiotics, you've finished chemotherapy, radiotherapy, non-steroidals, travelling, going into hospital, or an alcoholic binge. So before Christmas, probably a good idea to part as your hangover routine. And there's research on whether they could help you lose weight and dementia, etc. This is the one I would recommend because it's made in Britain and it's not expensive, and it's got all the probiotics which matter, which is the bifidus, lactobacillus, etc. But I'm sure there's plenty of others out there. Carcinogens. Of course, it's still important to reduce carcinogens after cancer because you can get further genetic breaks. which will cause the tumour to become more aggressive. And also they can be pro-inflammatory, and we know inflammation drives proliferation. And these are the main categories. So acrylamides in sort of superheated carbohydrate sugary foods. There's burnt meat, so the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons and nitroso compounds. And there's the plastics, of course, which are more estrogenic, which is driving proliferation. So interestingly, again, polyphenols comes to the rescue here. They can be directly anti-inflammatory. They can enhance antioxidant enzymes, which will mitigate some of the damage from carcinogen. So this is just a summary of what these foods can do. They can mitigate some of the harms we do. They can help the expression of genes we're born with, and they can slow the progression of existing cancer. So the food you will see lunchtime, no doubt, will be polyphenol rich, I would imagine. People say, you're talking nonsense. There's lots and lots and lots of evidence that populations who eat these foods have a lower risk of cancer. People who've had cancer who eat these sort of foods have a lower risk of relapse, just like the exercise things we've heard. And these are the two evidence reviews summarising them. And that includes, by the way, soya, which people are still being told around the country you shouldn't have if you've had breast cancer for some unknown reason. People who eat soya have a lower risk of breast cancer relapse in 2 major studies, and even in animal data there's no evidence of progression. So it's only if you take soya out into a chemical and take the soya chemical, then it could overexpress the estrogen receptor. These are the foods we particularly encourage, like sprouting vegetables have higher levels of phytochemicals, polyphenols. You don't have to, take all food which tastes like cardboard. Strawberries with 100% chocolate is packed full of healthy polyphenols. And of course, sprouting, you can put them into juices, etc. But I wouldn't recommend, as I just said, taking a chemical out of food and having it as a chemical, which can be harmful. You can concentrate food into a pill, as I say, I'm quite a pragmatist. I like to develop products. And this was one study we did where we looked at 4 polyphenol-rich foods which acted in synergy, which had their own profile of different phytochemicals, which worked in slightly different ways, as a way to boost the diet for someone who even might have a healthy diet or someone who has not a good diet. And that was most of you heard this before, so I'm rushing through. This was our first trial on men with prostate cancer, and we gave half a placebo and half the pill, and there was a profound difference in markers of prostate cancer, both in the bloodstream and on MRI, so it wasn't just a test. And that nicely, is now, this data is broadcast across the world. In the National Cancer Institute website, for example, it highlights that trial and those foods as the first one recommended for people looking for dietary interventions. They are, however, not drugs. They're only food, and they're not chemically extracted. So people have the choice to take these things themselves, but I have to stress these are not medicinal products. In that study, we also found that people's joint pains were improved and their water was improved, but it wasn't a primary endpoint, so we can't put a p-value on that. So as a consequence of that, we're looking at whether boosting foods could help other side effects after cancer. So this, and arthritis is particularly important. Many of you who've been through cancer treatments know that joint pains is a common side effect. This was a study we published in Australia which showed that 55% of our women were saying that arthritis was either the most or second most common side effect after cancer treatments, particularly if you're on hormone. So it's a big issue. So, as well as doing the things to protect you from arthritis, keeping your weight down, stretching, exercising, etc., we're thinking, well, maybe we could have a more pragmatic intervention. So we're using that supplement, plus or minus a probiotic, and we're measuring arthritis scores and urinary symptoms in men who are entered. And we're hoping that reducing the arthritis will allow participants to exercise more, and then they would have all the benefits of exercise as well. Prevention, well, we haven't got the money or capacity to look at a supplement for cancer prevention because that would take 10 years and cost millions and millions of pounds. The best thing we can do is we've got hold of a database from California, which has 155,000 people in it, and they've asked dietary habits over the last 10 years. And we've probed the data set with another number of things, including whether you take sugar or not, although that's previously been published, of course, that people who had sugar did have an increase in cancer. Do you remember a paper about a year ago, someone saying tea is bad? No. It didn't have the publicity I thought it would, but because of that, I thought, well, I'm not letting that go by. There was a paper, and the headline said tea causes cancer, which I thought was really bad. And what they did it was this data set, and they put tea amongst isoflavin-rich foods, which it isn't. But anyway, put it in that, and the whole group said there was a slight trend of cancer. And the headline for the journalist said, instead of that whole group, it said tea was bad. So we've run that analysis again, just by putting tea as the primary endpoint. And you'll be pleased to hear tea doesn't cause cancer, it actually protects you from cancer. So I'm going to send that to the journalist and say, can you do an apology from last year? Of course, they'll probably tell me to go away, but that's the second thing. What we also have done is said, if you eat a lot of those sort of foods against not eating them, do you have a lower risk of cancer? And of course, there is a lower risk. So it's all sort of pointing in the same direction, isn't it? Just finally, phytochemicals, natural chemicals, because that's our theme, is not all about eating them. This was a study where you mentioned nails. Where we randomized this is what happens after Taxotere and some other new biologicals, but mainly Taxotere. And there is some remedies for it. This was a patient we put hands and feet in a bucket of water. I was told off by the health and safety people because it's connected to the mains as well. But she only had nail damage on one hand, and you can get commercial gloves, but nobody likes using them because you can't see the fingers very well. So there are strategies, but fortunately, some of the people I work with in Coventry are fantastic botanists, and they were saying, look, these natural herbs you see all around us, they've got anti-inflammatory, they've got antioxidants, they've got antimicrobial properties, they've got DNA stabilizing properties. Why don't you make up a very particularly, and I can't claim credit for that because this was done by the botanists, where they got a whole load of sort of rare African herbs together which were rich in these things. And we did a randomized trial putting it on the nail beds during chemotherapy, and we were actually staggered that in the placebo group, there was about a 60% worse and about 40% had severe damage as expected. In the other group, their average nail quality actually improved despite being on chemotherapy, which is amazing. Again, we can't prescribe these. These are natural products. The company who supported the trial now sell it, but we can't prescribe it as a group, saying that we have bought a whole load through our charitable fund and we give it to our patients, but around the country it's difficult to broadcast the benefits. We're now doing 2 future studies with the dermatologist looking at psoriasis nails and split nails, because we've had quite a few anecdotal people reporting it helps that. So just to end, good. So this is just a whistle-stop of what we're doing in the unit, and we're hoping to get that information out as widely as we can. But this is what I like in my day job. I like giving radiotherapy. It's great fun, and you've got virtually no toxicity if you go to Genesis Care. You've got all these fancy things to stop it affecting. And it works, cure rate's fantastic. And I like giving these new biological treatments because you're seeing amazing response. But this is what I really like. So a man comes in, the usual thing, how are you feeling? Yeah, I get up 3 times at night. Are you on any other medication? Yeah, just the usual, doc. That's the usual. So what's the usual? So, blood pressure, statin for the cholesterol, got a bit of indigestion, so I'm on ranitidine. I'm a bit constipated, so I take a laxative. I've got some bad joints, so I'm on a painkiller for that. I'm not sleeping very well, so I have a sleeping tablet, and I get depressed at times, so I'm on an antidepressant, and of course I can't walk, so I'm on tamsulosin. The usual then. And if you say, so all the lifestyle-related drugs, then they say, what are you on about? What do you mean? I said, well, they're all lifestyle-related. All those things can be corrected by improving your lifestyle. And they say, no, that's rubbish. Anyway, and plus the fact he has prostate cancer, which is that's why he came to me. So this guy, real patient, had he had a sort of moderate cancer. It was Gleason 3+4 T2, but he decided to go into active surveillance, and this is what we did to him. We nagged him a lot, I think it's called behavioural change therapy. And then he went to the gym 3 times a week. And it's nice because you see these patients regularly, so you have to monitor their PSA, you have to monitor their MRI scans. He stopped all processed sugar and processed meat, all burnt meat. He just had fish 3 times a week. He looked at his diet, cut out all the carcinogens I mentioned. He had vegetable smoothies, not fruit smoothies, because fruit is a bit sweet when you put it into a smoothie. He did take the supplement, but mainly he just made sure his diet was very colourful. And within a year, he'd stopped all his medication. Because if you think about it, it's a chain reaction, isn't it? You stop the painkiller, therefore you don't need the ranitidine. You eat more vegetables, you don't need the laxative. He looked at his cholesterol, it was dropping. He didn't like the statin, so he stopped that. And eventually his blood pressure dropped. And all with the liaison with the GP. Those medications were costing nearly $6,500 a year, just for that one individual. So it just sort of shows how much you can achieve if people listen to you. At the same time, PSA dropped and the MRI showed improvement on his prostate cancer. He doesn't need treatment for that, which will also save £48,000 for the treatment. So that's what I like to see. That's success for me. Not treating him with medicine, which is good. So I hope you enjoyed the talk. And if you want to follow what we're doing, we're on the CancerNet, Twitter and Facebook and stuff like that. Thank you very much.